Greetings YouTube, it's Clarrisani here. It's been a while, hasn't it? Just had my daughter home and my husband home for the holidays, so it's a bit hard to make videos when they're both home. Anyway, I just finally got around to watching the video by Goodbye to the Left by Lindsay and it's an interesting watch. I'm going to link to it down in the description. If you haven't seen it yourself, it's an interesting watch to see someone who had put themselves as being a left-wing person, a left person. And clearly what had happened is they hadn't actually looked at it, and now what they're saying as to why they're saying goodbye to the left, I want to address her reasons for that. So I've actually written down her dot points and why she said she was part of left. Her reasons for it, for example, is that she believed in climate change, she took the bus, she supported gay marriage, she was pro-environment, and therefore she thought herself as being part of the left wing. No, none of those things make you left or right. They're actually quite neutral. I mean, case in point, I want to bring up Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a Republican. He's very much to the right. He's very much a conservative. But he has just launched a campaign where they're suing the fossil fuel industries for knowing about climate change, the risk of climate change and how fossil fuels are damaging the environment. And they've known about this since the 50s. And they have known about it. But they covered it up and kept doing what they were doing because it was making them rich. And they've done this at the behest of everybody else in the world. It was their profits over people, and that's pretty much the climate today. And really, it's not the first time this has happened. We've seen cigarette companies, we've seen all different sort of companies. In fact, I highly recommend, if you've never actually read it, this book here, which is Merchants of Doubt. And it actually talks about things like how the companies, it actually covers global warming or climate change, and it goes about how companies would pay scientists to skew the data to create both points of view. And it covers your cigarette smoke, your acid rain, smog, and it makes you angry when you see how they've used their money to cover up all this stuff and to put two sides in just so they could get a profit. And it's, again, climate change isn't a left or a right thing. It's not about whether or not you believe it exists or not. It's like saying, do you believe in gravity? Well, gravity exists. Climate change exists. We did it. It's a fact. It comes down to whether or not you accept the facts or if you don't accept fact. Alternative facts, if you will, as one of Trump's people call it. There are no such things as alternative facts. Alternative facts are lies. So accepting climate change or not accepting climate change is whether or not you believe the truth or you want to deny it. And again, it's not a left or right thing. Taking the bus isn't a left or right thing. In fact, gay marriage isn't a left or right thing. Very much the Conservatives have taken up the anti-gay marriage. But again, it's not a left or right thing. I mean, it's now legal here in my country. And it was brought in under our Conservative government. It says it all right there. It's a social change. Kind of like how gun control here in Australia was brought in by our Conservative government. It wasn't a left or right thing. It was a right or wrong thing. And the right thing to do here was to reform our gun control laws to prevent mass shootings. And since we had Port Arthur in the 90s, there have only been 2 mass shootings here in Australia. 2. And I'm not sure about the other one, but I know at least one of them was domestic, as in a man killed his family. And I think it was his parents, not his wife and kids, if I recall. He actually killed his family, his parents. But yeah, it's a right or wrong thing, not so much a left or right thing. Although, for some reason, certain sides take up those things. Now I want to get into her list of reasons for why she left the left. And this is what she says about the left. She says they are pro-censorship. They have a victimhood culture, believe in moral righteousness, taught that claiming to be offended leads to moral victory, that they don't believe in personal responsibility, intolerant to diversity of thought. They are humorless, want to make society boring, that no one can do so much as make a joke, that if you're not 100% on their side, they will slander you, that you won't allow talk about things like being white, that you have to be part of the white guilt or you're a white nationalist and therefore the enemy, that they want to control the narrative, and that they are that it's unacceptable for any nuance. Now, there's a few problems with that list. First and foremost, that list itself sounds like it's come straight out of the alt-right handbook. You've basically just ticked all the points that we hear coming out of, like, Alex Jones. And you actually say you're not sure if you're a centrist or a white, or not say white nationalist, that's a Freudian slip. Say whether or not you're not sure if you consider yourself right or centrist, but this list that you've come out with is basically the dot-pointed list of slandering the left. That's from the alt-right, so I think that you've answered your question as to which side you are. Let's just go through that list. Pro-censorship. That is not a left or right thing. You will find it on both sides. That is something you will find on both sides. You will often find it more on the right than you will the left. I mean, case in point, let's have a look at something here in Australia. Which it's political transparency. Now, there was an issue under our previous government where they would release a list of how many illegal boats were bringing refugees to Australia. So these weren't ones that had applied and had come. They'd actually pay these people to smuggle them into Australia via boat, usually from Indonesia. And a lot of what would actually happen with these boat people was actually horrendous. They'd pay through the nose to get on these boats. And there were cases where the people that were smuggling them would force them overboard and have them drown and go back for more. Often these boats were rickety and would sink. There was no guarantee they were actually going to make it. There were a lot of cases of bodies washing up on shore. It's horrendous how desperate these people were to get from where they were to come here. And they'd lose everything. I mean, the shirts on their back was basically all they were left. They'd use every ounce, every little piece they had of money. They'd pawn stuff. But our previous government, well, I wouldn't say left-wing, because the Labor Party wasn't left-wing. They're neoliberal, which is right. Although they're actually starting to change, which is wonderful. They would put up a list. They believed in putting up a list from every single illegal boat that was intercepted, the number of illegal refugees in the country. They would put up transparency, basically. We had all the numbers. They'd publish the numbers. When the government changed and our hardline conservative government took power, they blocked all of those reports. They blocked all of those numbers, and they actually made it illegal, with up to a 10-year jail term, to actually report on one of our detention camps that we had in Nauru and I can't think of the other one. Nauru's the one that I think they shut down. Manus, that's it. Batasang. They made it 10 up to over 10. Journalists could get 10 years in jail for reporting on this. So if you want to talk censorship, and of course you've got Hungary right now, which is massive protests in Hungary right now, and their hardline right-wing government, which are very much white nationalist, and they have actually been shutting down news organisations that would report the facts or oppose them, and nearly basically all the media there now is state-run or state or pro-government. So in recent history, it's not the left but the right that shuts people down, but there are examples, yes, of the left trying to shut things down, such as the protest to try and get speakers banned from talking. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in, if someone's announced to come talk somewhere, I think they should be allowed to talk. There are certain people who I don't think should be allowed to talk. Criminals, for example. But you should be allowed to have, I believe in free speech, you should be allowed to have free speech. But there's a big difference, I think, between individuals that protest a speaker and a government that does the censorship. In fact, the political correctness is essentially when the government censors what you can and can't say, and I'm afraid to say that and you talk about political correctness in your video, Lindsay, there is actually some political correctness going on in America right now, very much from the Trump administration, who actually put out a list of words that the government entities are not allowed to say. That is political correctness. That is actually what the definition term is. So political correctness is not so much coming from the left right now in America, more than it is coming from the actual Republican government. Now, your victimhood culture, again, that is not a left or a right thing. You see it on both sides. There are people on the left who do play the victim. Everything's offensive. Oh my God, everything's a victim, you know? Everyone's a victim. But there's a difference between that and what we see often on the right. Look at your war on Christmas. That's playing the Christian card, the victim card. Even someone that you actually talked about, your Faith Goldie, she put up a tweet, saying she could not believe how the Christians in Bethlehem had been oppressed because she heard an Islamic call to prayer in Bethlehem. There's your victimhood culture right there. Now, just a record, the Christians in Palestine have not been oppressed. They actually stand side by side with their Islamic counterparts, their Islamic people. And Christmas in Palestine is one of the largest celebrations. It is amazing when they're allowed to celebrate it. And if you want to talk about who's oppressing who, the Christians recently celebrated Palm Sunday in Bethlehem, and they were actually set upon and arrested and attacked by the Israeli occupation forces. So it's not the Islamic people were actually, the Muslims were actually trying to protect them from the IOF. So if anyone's oppressing anyone in Bethlehem, it's not the Muslims oppressing the Christians, it's the Zionists. But there are people on the left who play victim. But they're not quite as You see it more on, I can't know how to put this, it's more something you commonly see on the right than the left. It does happen on the left, but you see it more on the right. Often when the left say they are receiving death threats and being attacked, they actually are. And that they're being oppressed, sometimes it does happen. And it doesn't happen so much on the right. Because you look at how some of these people on Twitter, these right-wingers on Twitter say, oh my God, I'm being oppressed because they deleted my Twitter account. They're trying to silence my free speech, but often these people had actually violated the terms of service. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with the terms of service, but first and foremost, Twitter can do whatever they damn want. YouTube can do whatever they want. They're a business. And of course, that's not political correctness, that's not censorship. You can still go say what you want to elsewhere. But there's a difference between being silenced by people that are trying to dox you. And I know people on the right get doxed, usually by their own. But there's a difference between that and then people dogpiling someone on the left and false flag in their videos, which happens very commonly on the left. And of course, the victimhood culture, all the, like, people are saying that the current movements that are around at the moment, such as the movements by the women, we've seen the Black Lives Matter, and how people saying that's victimhood culture. That's not, it's not victimhood culture if these people actually are victims. They're not so much victims, I would say, they're survivors. But the people on the other side saying, oh my God, the Black Lives Matter is trying to oppress the whites, that is victimhood culture. Those people are being victims. Now, your moral righteousness, again, it's not something that's left or right. It's not. You do get people play the morality card, but again, it's more something you find with people who believe in faith. It's more people who have got a cat moving here. People who believe in faith. I'm about to get a cat, am I? What are you doing, Sasha? No, cat's gone. But anyway, it's, again, not so much a left or right thing. But most people who play the morality card are usually religious. It's more something you see on that side, and most religious people, particularly in America, can be found on the right. Like, for example, they say that gay marriage is unacceptable because morals. Women should be at home because morals. It's, again, it's not a left or right thing, but you tend to see it more on the right than the left. I do see it on the left. I have seen it on the left. I will call people out for it on the left. I will call people out for it on the right. But it's, the moral card is usually something played by people on the right. Claiming to be offended results in moral victory. Nobody teaches anybody that. Nobody believes that. Now, I am getting very pissed off with the amount of people that get offended by rubbish. You're right, there are cases where people cannot take a joke, and it's on both sides. It drives me nuts, and I have to actually credit my husband about this, because he's very good at playing the devil's advocate, and he's made me really wake up to the fact that even the Young Turks now are saying this too. They're agreeing that there are people on the left that are taking things too far and getting offended by everything. And I guess that could play into your victimhood culture. But as H3H3 recently said in a video, just because you're offended by a joke does not mean the joke is offensive. And you can't say that enough. Not everything is offensive just because you're offended by something. And getting offended for somebody else Look, there are things which are blatantly offensive. Blackface, for example. Don't do it. Blackface. But, and of course, using the N-word if you're not part of that, you know? But if you're singing or reciting a rap lyric and you say that word while you're white, that you're just reciting a rap video using the words in the rap video, and they happen to, or that song, and it happens to have the N-word in that song. You don't get offended by the person saying it or by the song. If you get what I mean? The person singing the song isn't trying to be offensive, they're just singing the song. They like the song. You don't get offended at them for dropping the N-word. But if they use it in the unacceptable sense, like the white person calling N-word, black people N-words to put them down, and I do see that, kind of like I see people call Middle Eastern people derogatory terms about sand. But yeah, they're offensive, but it all comes down to context. Context is very important. I think I am going to get a cat. I am getting a cat. Hello, cat. Want to say hello? This is Sasha, one of my two cats. But yeah, but nobody's taught that being offended results in a moral victory. Being offended over something that's not offensive usually results in you getting mocked, laughed at, and basically run out of town. Whoops. Oh dear. Here goes my camera. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't mean a moral victory. Nobody's claiming that, nobody's doing that. And, well, not nobody's claiming that, I mean nobody on the left is teaching that. It's just something that some people do, and it's on both sides. Now, you got don't believe in personal responsibility. Again, that's not a left or a right thing. There are people on both sides, but often you see the people who believe in consequences, they actually sit down and believe in consequences. It's more something you will find on the left. It really is. You look at a recent poll that was done where they talked to young people about why they think democracy is dying in America. People on the left were more inclined to believe it was a result of corruption. It was more a result of the systematic change. It's more a, it's change of what they're doing, whereas the people on the right were more inclined to believe it was the media. Now both sides, the largest proportion on both sides believed it was money in politics, which is really what the problem is. America's an oligarchy, not a democracy. But yeah, it's personal responsibility. It's on both sides. People on the left are more likely to think about how their actions now will affect the long term, whereas people, particularly on the hard right, are more about serving their own self-interest. And honestly, that's very much what the politicians in America and Australia and all that are more about. They're more about serving their self-interest. And they don't care what their self-interest does to others, so no responsibility. And the willing, even Donald Trump has got no personal responsibility at all. He blames everyone else. But mind you, there are ones on the left, but if you're going to bring up Hillary Clinton and not taking responsibility for her loss and blaming everyone else, she is not left-wing. She's to the right of Reagan. In fact, there's America right now. If Ronald Reagan ran for politics right now, he wouldn't even be up as a Democrat. He'd be too left-wing for the Democrats, really. Hopefully not for long, because there's a change a-coming, but yes. Now, intolerant of diversity afoot. The main principle of the left is diversity. We believe in diversity. We're all about the diversity. We want to hear all sides of you. There are some on the far left that do exist that don't believe in the diversity and the point of view. But again, it's more something that you'll find in the right. The Conservatives are very much about upholding it's conservative. You want to conserve the traditions, and the traditions, particularly in the West, is, I hate to say it, white male dominance. And often, particularly in most countries, that is a Catholic/Christian dominance. You look at the rhetoric against the Muslims. You look at, even in my neighbourhood, there is a really, 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 really strong anti-Muslim, anti-black, particularly the Sudanese, anti-black sentiment right here, right now, which is quite, frankly, quite sickening. And I've actually had death threats and people say, I hope you get raped, I hope you get assaulted, I hope they break into your house. And this has come from right wingers, all because I have said that you need to throw. It's not so much about throwing the perpetrators in jail, than more is about getting to these people before they commit the crime. And that not everybody in this community is bad, and I've had death and rape threats because of that. And this is in my own community, with people who live in my community. So again, I'm all for the diversity. Most left-wing people are for the diversity. There are some on the right that are for the diversity, but it's more the lack of diversity of thought is more a conservative thing than it is a progressive thing. Now, you're humorless. You're claiming the left are humorless. Well, I hate to break it to you, but most comedians, professionally, are left-wing. I'm not kidding. Look them up. Most comedians are left-wing. They really are. Even the ones who write your TV shows, very many of them are left-wing. Sure, there are some that can't take a joke, and there are people on the left that get offended by jokes. But it's more it's not the left that are humorless, it's your poles, it's your extremists on both sides, and sometimes you're right wing, but most people on both sides are happy to have a joke. Want to make society boring. What's boring about multiculturalism? Seriously, what's boring about learning about different cultures and having a mix of races? What's boring about wanting everybody to be equal in terms of the law? Not equal in terms of beliefs, but in terms of the law. What's boring about wanting women to be able to get out there and work and have an equal opportunity, and people of different races to get out there and have an equal opportunity? What's boring is your alt-right friends and their beliefs that women shouldn't be allowed to, should be in the kitchen, and that Muslims shouldn't be allowed in. The status quo wants to keep things the same. As I said, conservatives are about keeping things the same, and there's nothing more boring than no change. Change keeps things interesting. So again, it's not the right, it's not the left that want to make things boring. It's your people who want no change that make things boring. No one can take so much as a joke. Again, I've already covered that. Both sides do it. It is frustrating. There are jokes out there that are offensive, but it's not a left or a right thing. If you're not 100% on their side, they will slander you, which is funny that you say that, because again, it's not a left or a right thing. There are thing, there are people on the left that do slander. I will agree. I mean, but there are people on the right too, mate. I've had my name slandered several times. And I mean not my screen name. My screen name has been slandered. I've been slandered. But my real name, I've actually been slandered in real life. I've actually been slandered by politicians in real life. Because I used to do stuff as I was a journalist. And I wrote opinion pieces, and I'm afraid to say that some of my opinions came out and have actually since proven to be correct. And people don't like it when that happens. Am I saying I'm always correct? No. I've written stuff where I look at it now and I cringe. But you'll get slandered by both sides, and I don't agree with anybody slandering anyone. But like I said, I've been slandered by the right. I've seen people on the right slandered by the left. It's not a right or left thing. It's a right or wrong thing, and it's very wrong. I don't believe in slander. But there is also some cases where it's not slander. Richard Spencer is a Nazi. That's not slander. Richard Spencer's a Nazi. Donald Trump is a rapist. According to his ex-wife, he raped his ex-wife. That's not slander. It's in sworn testimony, legal documents. It's not slander if it's true. Now, what else we got? The next one we've got. Won't later talk about things like being white. It's not so much about not talking about things like being white. It's about how you talk about things like being white. I'm thinking of making some videos about white privilege. And yes, white privilege exists. Now, doesn't mean there are places where being white is detrimental to you. Go to South Africa right now and be white. Now, what happened with apartheid has really stirred things up, but there is a person there in South Africa right now that actually has advocated for the murder of white farmers, and that is an attack on the white. Oh dear. That is an attack on the white. Here in the West, in Europe, in Britain, America, my country of Australia, white privilege is a thing. It exists. It's true. You know, you can talk about it. You don't realise it until you actually sit up and realise it. I mean, I once took offence to being caught saying I had white privilege. I once took offence. Then I got educated. And I learned that, yes, I do have white privilege. And I don't know as much as I should about things. But you can talk about being white. It comes down to how you talk about being white. Like if you say that whites are more intelligent than anybody else, any other races, yeah, that's not how it works. Then you're a white supremacist. If you say that your country is white and should have more, and that keep out all the Muslims, you know, and when you say keep out the Muslims, you're implying keep out the Arabs. That's white nationalist. Those are no-nos. Those are no-nos. That's not, the way you don't get to talk about being white, that case, that's wrong. I mean, you can say it, but you're going, like I said, you've got to be a white supremacist, white nationalist. But you can talk about it if you want. I mean, people say it all the time on here, on YouTube. Now, you've also said that if you don't have white guilt, then you're a white nationalist or the enemy. That ties back in. If you don't, some people don't have white guilt. That's true. Some people don't. I mean, I'm not guilty about being white, even though I know what my ancestors did in this country. You can be accepting of the fact that white privilege exists without being guilty. But at the same time, you can also use that privilege for good. You know, you can use that privilege to make things better for the people who don't have it. So it doesn't make you mean you have white guilt. It just means that you are aware of the situation. And even if you don't have that white guilt, it doesn't make you a white nationalist or white supremacist. Nowhere near it. Now, want to control the narrative? About 90% of the media in America is right-wing. And if you dare say anything that is against the Republicans, you're slandered as having the liberal bias. Let me put this down. American media does not have a liberal bias. Okay? America media does not have a liberal bias. They have a conservative bias because they are scared of being called a liberal bias. MSNBC now has more conservative people on it than they have left-wing. They fired most of their left-wing people. Most of them now work on the Young Turks, as it happens. Young Turks? Yeah, that's a liberal bias. They're not afraid of saying that. But CNN were pro-Bush. They were all about the Bush War. They were all for the Bush War. They don't have a liberal bias. Rachel Maddow, meh. She has a slight one. Fox News is hardline right-wing propaganda. They're almost government TV now. So, people controlling the narrative in America, I mean, look at Sinclair Media in America, who send out figs for all of their broadcasters to read at the same time. That is controlling the narrative. It's a perfect example of what government media does. That is controlling the narrative. The left wing don't control the narrative in the world because most of the people that own the corporations in the world are right wing. Even in Australia, here in Australia, we've just basically done away with the 2 out of 3 law, which means it was covered originally print, radio, television. They're your 3. And you could have someone that owns 2 of them. You could have, like, someone might own radio stations and TV stations, but therefore they couldn't own print. You could own print and the TV, which is what Murdoch does, but that means you couldn't own the radio. And it was to prevent bias, it was to prevent monopolies, but they've pretty much done away with that law now, so Murdoch's going to be all over that. And of course you've got the internet now, so it's actually at a fall. But Murdoch here in Australia controls most of the media here. Go up to Queensland, he owns 95% of the newspapers nearly. He owns most of the newspapers here. Even the paper which people say is The Age, which people say is left-wing, isn't. It used to be factually based, and facts have a well-known liberal bias. And I don't mean liberal in the classical liberal style, which is our Australian Liberal Party. I mean progressive. Its facts are known to be left-wing because they're inconvenient. But even ABC, which people go on about, your ABC, their ABC, ABC is liberal, it's progressive, it's left-wing. It's now run by one of Murdoch's people. They're cutting all of their factual programming. They're cutting all of their investigative journalists. So even that has been spouting out right-wing ideological messages. So again, it's not the left that's trying to control the narrative. particularly at the government level. It's the right. And again, look at Hungary, where they are actually shutting down all of the left-wing or oppositional newspapers. That is definitely controlling the narrative. And you want to talk, and your last point, which was, want to make it unacceptable to accept nuances. Now, my entire talk here has been about nuance. Everything I've said has nuance. We're happy to talk about the nuance. We really are. We want to talk about it. We don't accept the world. The left doesn't see the world of black and white. It's not. But, and most, I would hope, most right-wingers don't see the world in black and white either. But your hardline, your alt-right, do. You're either with them or against them. It's actually how Donald Trump knows. You're either with him or you're against him. He doesn't like being questioned. If you question him, you're against him. Now, I just want to address a couple more points here. And that was how you, Lindsay, were upset about being called a white nationalist or being said that you are part of that group. That all comes back to Faith Goldie. Because you say she's not a white nationalist neo-Nazi and you say all that, but you've got to understand she sympathises with Richard Spencer. She has spouted a lot of what he says. And he is a neo-Nazi. And you say, the difference between white nationalists and white supremacy. Yeah, there's a difference. But when it comes to someone like Faith Goldie, she is a white nationalist. And what part of white nationalism is white supremacy. So what made people think that you were aligned with her is the fact that you organised an event for her. And typically, if you organise an event for a person, you usually do, unless you advertise it as saying a debate or have someone up there who's ready to do the balance and checks, typically you support. And you defended, even in this video here, you defended Faith Goldie, and the fact that you defend someone like that, it kind of does, that's why people think you're part of that group. Because she's not just an alt-right person. She recites Richard Spencer, and I don't believe in racism, and I'm not so much, well, I don't believe in racism, but I don't believe in violence. But it was sort of cathartic seeing that man punched in the face. It really was. It couldn't have happened to a nicer person. Kind of like when Murdoch's house got burnt down because of the bushfires. Well, I like to call them bushfires because of the fires. That was cathartic as well, because this is a man that pushes the narrative that the climate change isn't real. Again, controlling the narrative. And yet his house was destroyed because the climate had made things so dry that it caused those fires. So, karma? Bit of karma. So yeah, Lindsay, you're saying goodbye to the left, but you were never part of the left. I'm sorry. You never were. It's kind of like how Sargon says he's a liberal, but he means classical liberal, and classical liberal is just a fancy way of saying conservative. You, Sargon, you're not left-wing. You never were. I'm sorry. So you can't say goodbye to something that you weren't part of. And I guess that's just where I'm going to have to end this. So I wish you well. I hope maybe you stop spouting the right-wing talking points, and maybe you do come back to the centre, because the centre is a good place to be. And Maybe you do need someone like my husband who play devil's advocate with you, because honestly, having someone like that in your life that you are willing to listen to and take someone that will take what you say and play that devil's advocate, whether they support you or not, that's your check and balance. And I hope you find someone like that. I do, because it sounds to me like you need someone. And like I said, I wish you well, and YouTube, I guess I'll see you next time.